I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the Mines and Money 5 at 5 episode for today, the 28th of May. It's been 2 months since we launched this series, which has had the support of the Melbourne Mining Club and continues to get that series support. This week's episode, our partner is AMEC, and obviously I'd like to welcome Kate Dickson and Lucy McClean from the AMEC team who have helped organise all the speakers for today's episode. And also a special welcome to Gerald Whittle and the Whittle Consulting team who are joining us with some technical expertise on mining projects and its relation to mining investment and mine planning. So thank you, Gerald, and also Rizel there from the Whittle Consulting team. As an update, just quickly, I've mentioned to some of you that we've got our APAC online event, the Mines and Money APAC online, which is taking place on the 23rd to the 25th of June. We've already confirmed over 50 speakers who will be joining us with the Queensland Government for 3 days of online content, business meetings, chat rooms, an online exhibition, and also a 5 at 5 episode hosted by the Brisbane Mining Club. So we're really excited to move our 2 events, Energy Mines and Money and Mines and Money Online, to an online platform, and we do hope that you do join us for that particular event. More information can be found on the Mines and Money website. This intro doesn't take too long, so I will actually pass on to our first host for this evening's episode, Lucy McClean from AMEC. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Shireen. And look, it's great to be here, and AMEC's delighted to be episode partner for today's Mines and Money. So for those of you who don't know AMEC, we're a leading national association with somewhere around 300 members now. Our members are explorers right through to producers and all the businesses and services that support the minerals industry. So we act, of course, as a great one of the industry associations by defending our members, as our government partners will know, by ensuring our members are up to date, connected and networked, and providing opportunities and ensuring that, as well as actively promoting the industry. So today's Mines and Money episode is focused on New South Wales and Queensland with, as Shireen mentioned, the halftime entertainment in this State of Origin series of Gerald Whittle from Whittle Consulting. So look, let's start here in New South Wales. It really is an exciting place to be. So New South Wales, of course, has plenty of coal, but look, also we've got the biggest, one of the biggest gold mines in Australia, Acadia. North Park's just up the road, and some amazingly exciting discoveries at, of course, Peel, out around COBAR, right through to Alkane, Skye and others. So look, not only are the minerals great in New South Wales, but also we have for possibly one of the most passionate ministers in the Deputy Premier, who is engaged in our industry and really wants New South Wales to be a premier investment state for the mining industry. So to make that happen, we have the department that works alongside the Deputy Premier. And here today, I'd like to welcome the Deputy Secretary of Mining, Exploration and Geoscience. That's longhand for the head of the Mines Department, and that's Michael Wright. Over to you, Michael.
Thanks for that introduction, Lucy. And yes, I'm Michael Wright, Deputy Secretary of Mining, Exploration and Geoscience, also known as MEG. Within the Department of Regional New South Wales. This department was established by, as Lucy said, our very impassioned Deputy Premier John Barilaro just last month to ensure that the people of regional New South Wales and the industries of regional New South Wales have a strong say with the government, effectively countering some of the tendency towards city-centric thinking and city-centric funding. So as part of that department, MEG is committed to delivering high-quality services to the industry and the community to support our mission, which is to make New South Wales a preferred destination for investment in mining and exploration. We look to deliver on this mission through setting the strategic policy framework for responsible minerals development in New South Wales, promoting investment in our mineral and exploration sectors, acquiring quality, pre-competitive geoscience data, and providing an increasingly trusted and responsive titles assessment service. So I don't need to tell you all that we live in very challenging times. The New South Wales government is strongly committed to supporting the mining and exploration industries through this difficult period and beyond. We understand parts of the industry are doing relatively well, other parts of the industry are hurting. And this is why we recently introduced a range of relief measures for the exploration sector in particular, including a 6-month deferment of payments on new exploration licenses, a 6-month deferment of the commencement of exploration licenses as well, and recognition that COVID-19 is an extenuating circumstance when it comes to completing work programs, and that will be taken into account when it comes to looking at renewing exploration licenses. Now, our Deputy Premier has a very strong belief in the resources sector in New South Wales. Last year, we released the New South Wales Mineral Strategy. This is the first time in many years that the resources sector has been centre stage in terms of government policy thinking. It's been absent from that policy debate for quite a few years, so it's great to see that we are back in the limelight once more. Following on from that, we've been talking up the investment attractiveness of New South Wales at the IMAC conference, Shaun, in Melbourne last year, at PDAC, Toronto earlier this year. We've also been meeting with investors in Japan and New York. We're very interested in what we have to offer, certainly in terms of critical minerals, but also our fossil fuels and industrial metals as well. Our pre-competitive geological data acquisition is world-class, and we've backed this up with industry incentives to explore more in this state through our cooperative drilling program. We're working very closely with the Commonwealth's Critical Minerals Facilitation Office on attracting investment for our shovel-ready critical mineral projects. And that includes opportunities for downstream processing of those critical minerals and manufacturing as well. In some of our special activation precincts in New South Wales, like parks, where the government has taken away some of that red tape associated with getting planning approvals through, so you can move very, very quickly to getting a planning approval in those special activation precincts, much more quickly than in other parts of the state. We're also mapping out what the future of coal in New South Wales might look like, and we hope to make an announcement about that very shortly. And depending on what happens with the our Independent Planning Commission's consideration of the Santos Narrabri gas project, we're hoping that there may well be a future for gas here in New South Wales as well. We're meeting our industry KPIs in terms of turning around title applications, hitting a 90% KPI rate. And we've gone live with a new digital titles management system, which is underpinning a more robust and responsive titles assessment system. But in these times, it's clear that more needs to be done, and we can't take the sector for granted. We've already seen how declining coal prices, particularly met coal, is impacting on some of our miners, with production being pulled back. And while gold is a good news story in New South Wales, with prices holding up brilliantly and some great discoveries recently, commodity prices for our industrial metals like zinc and copper continue to disappoint. So we want to work with the industry to leverage every opportunity to rebuild and expand the sector in the post-COVID era. We're working very closely with New South Wales Treasury on the development of an economic recovery package for the post-pandemic era, including incentives and initiatives to support exploration and mining in the state. As part of this, we've reached out to Lucy at AMEC and to our friends at the New South Wales Minerals Council to get their great ideas on what they think needs to be done to ensure the economy can be restarted and the role that exploration and mining can play in that restart. We've linked up with what's happening at the federal level through the National COVID Coordination Commission. Some great thinking happening there about what should be done in the resources sector. One message that's coming back to me loud and clear from the industry is do whatever you can to reduce unnecessary regulatory burden. And so while a lot of this is in the planning system, both at the federal and state level, there is a lot we can do in the mining titles administration space as well. So to this end, we have embarked on a major red tape reduction initiative program focused on providing greater certainty and timeliness of decision-making for the industry. Now, this should mean that explorers and miners can get on the ground and start work sooner. Our estimates indicate that if 5 major mining operations in New South Wales could start 6 months earlier, there'd be something like a $1.1 billion net present value to New South Wales, just from a 6-month reduction in waiting times. We're also looking to expand opportunities in the cooperative drilling space. We'd love to be able to fund some of those other promising drilling proposals we received from our last round, which our money didn't quite extend to. So we're working with Treasury to hopefully source some additional funds for that. And we continue to release really great pre-competitive geo data, such as the recently released COBAR Airborne Electromagnetic Survey, which you can download from MEG's MinView data portal. So the resources sector is now more important in New South Wales than it ever was. We want to continue to work with the industry and the community to ensure that it stays that way well in the future. So thank you very much. And happy to take any questions or.
Thank you, Michael. And look, we have one quick question that we received by email prior to this event, and that was regarding community engagement, of course, critical in New South Wales. Yep. What's your requirements for community engagement, especially right now where people can't meet and IT can be difficult? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, this really plays out significantly in the planning approval space, and we have some significant petroleum and mineral proposals which are tracking through the New South Wales, what's called the Independent Planning Commission process. Part of that process requires public hearings. The government was very concerned that COVID would prevent those hearings occurring and would significantly add to the time taken for decisions in that space. So the government's introduced a regulation to make virtual meetings a legitimate way of holding a public hearing. Obviously, yeah, Lucy, technologies like we're using now are increasingly accepted by communities. I mean, there's always going to be an issue with people having access to technology and to the internet, but we're hopeful that yeah, there is a way forward. We don't just want to put things on hold in this period. And certainly, the government, by actually regulating to allow for those virtual meetings for Independent Planning Commission hearings, is very much on the front foot in terms of accessing and utilising the technologies available to keep the state moving.
Excellent, and we certainly look forward to more of that. So more questions, please send those through to Shireen, and we'll have a panel session afterwards with Michael and all of our other speakers. So now let's move on to one of the great tenure holders in New South Wales, and that is Peel Mining. Look, certainly Peel is one of our leading tenure holders, and in fact, Peel did win the AMEC Prospector Award last year. That's an award that was not given out the 2 years prior, but Peel won it for some really exciting discoveries. So let me hand it over to Rob Tyson, Peel's CEO, to tell you more. Over to you, Rob.
Thanks, Lucy. Look, just to follow on from Michael, I guess, look, we really appreciate the way New South Wales has responded to the COVID-19 crisis, obviously as an explorer, and certainly the changes around pushing out timelines related to payments on rent and exploration activity is really important. And we're hopeful that we won't slow down too much, to be honest, but there's no question it's going to affect the industry overall. But we appreciate certainly what New South Wales has done to date. And it is a fantastic destination to explore. I don't want to say that too loudly because we've quite enjoyed working without too much competition for quite a while. When you talk about us having one of the largest tenure holdings in New South Wales, that's correct. But we've spent about $50 million on exploration in the last decade. And I challenge most of the majors to come up with a number like that on greenfields exploration. If I could jump to the first slide, please, Green. Look, I'm not sure whether you guys can see that. It looks like it's coming up. So look, I'll run through Peel's business quite quickly. Look, we're out in the COBAR Basin, and look, we are looking to build a high-grade base metal business, and we've been working out there for the best part of 11 years now. And we've been, you don't spend $50 million on exploration without doing a lot of drilling. So we've certainly done a lot since we've been in that part of the world, and 90% of those drill meters, or kilometers I should say, have been completed out in the COBAR Basin. And look, we've made the discovery. So we've made Mallee Bull discovery was our first back in 2010, 2011, very early 2011. And that took a couple of years to sort of unfold. So 2011, 12 and 13. we spent there. We then made our next discovery, which is called Wirlong in 2014-15. And then more recently, we discovered the Southern Nights deposit, which is about a kilometre south of the old Wagga prospect, which was certainly known about for a long time, but forgotten. And I guess that's one of the things in New South Wales is there's a lot of prospectivity, a lot of forgotten prospects that really do deserve to have the ruler run over them and some drilling done on them. All of this is about defining critical mass. When, you know, we love winning the Explorer of the Year award or the Prospector award, but this is really about, you know, economic return to our shareholders ultimately. And we need to define that critical mass and essentially take it all into studies for development. And we've started our scoping study work on Mallee Bull and Wagga Southern Nights. Wirlong's a bit early still, but we're certainly building towards critical mass. We think we've certainly made the general discoveries that can develop into mines, and that's about delivering, you know, the mines that we want to come from our work. So high-grade mines is what we're looking for, what we think we've got, and we want to make them safe and efficient, and eventually get that return to shareholders. Our share price certainly doesn't reflect it right now. The next slide, please. So COBAR, it is outside of Broken Hill. It's the next best destination really in terms of metal endowment in New South Wales. So it's part of the Lachlan Fold Belt at the top of it. And it's prolific in terms of metal endowment. There's four mines there essentially. Endeavour's just gone on to care and maintenance after 37 years, I think it is. 1983 was when it started up. But CSA, Peak, Hera, and one that's not on there that should be on there is Manuka. That's just started up again. So there's 4 existing operations. We have focused on the central and southern parts of the COBAR Basin. We've made those 3 discoveries, but all of our discoveries have basically those 5 metals to some degree. So that's a style that you find in the COBAR Basin is they're polymetallic. They're sort of VMS-related style of mineralisation. But generally you'll find copper, lead, zinc, silver and gold. Just the ratios change depending on the deposit. Mallee Bull's copper rich, Wirlong's copper rich, and Wagga Southern Nights is lead zinc rich. The next slide, please. So we've made those discoveries, but now it's about taking those discoveries through to development. And we've got an experienced team. So we've had Jim Simpson join us recently as a director and executive director in charge of mining. So he's really focusing our attention on you know, making the jump from explorer to miner. Jim's got a lot of experience. He was a previous managing director at our neighbour Aurelia, who owned the Hera and Peak mines. But look, we don't see anything changing. We're going to focus on this COBAR region. We see lots of potential there to continue to grow our resource base and move into mining in the next few years, hopefully. The COBAR area is a fantastic place, as I said. Look, last slide, please. And look, Mallee Bull's a copper-rich deposit. All of our deposits, as I've said, have got copper, lead, zinc, and silver and gold. But a couple of them, Mallee Bull and Wirlong, are high-grade copper deposits. Look, we think copper's going to have its day in the sun sooner rather than later. There's been a real lack of exploration and discovery in the copper story, and I'm sure most of you guys who follow the mining industry and commodities would be aware of that. But the deposits out at COBAR are high grade by comparison. Most of the average grade of the top 20 undeveloped copper deposits in the world is something like 0.5% copper. The resources out that way are generally 1.5% plus. So we see ourselves, I guess, becoming a producer in the next few years, hopefully. You know, that's a very short summary of Peel, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, Lucy.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rob. And in fact, look, a question we had again prior to the Mines and Money was regarding capital raising. Of course, very critical for any exploration company or mining company, and it can be difficult right now. What's your pearls of wisdom on that one?
Oh, look, well, Peel was born in the GFC, so we kind of had to learn from the beginning that, you know, this is the way the world is. But look, I think stick to the plan. You know, don't chop and change to different commodities. You know, stick with what you believe in. If you're an exploration company, and look, there's always, if your projects are good, you'll always find capital for those projects, is my belief. And there's, you know, whether it's equity funding or joint venture funding, you know, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. So I think you just got to keep your focus and not cut and chase to the next commodity, hot commodity. Stick with what your plan is my advice.
Okay.
We actually have two questions from the floor, if that's okay. We have a question from Rizel Zisman from Whittle for Rob.
Yep, sure.
Rob, fascinating story. Can you please tell us which innovations or new technologies in exploration will impact or benefit you the most over the next 3 years?
Oh, look, certainly geophysics. You know, we've been very heavy on geophysics our whole time in the COBAR Basin. Lots of electrical geophysics, so electromagnetics, IP, even Miesler mass old techniques. We find that they really, but you can't just use one. We sort of throw the toolbox at them. You know, try them all and see which works. Electromagnetics is certainly something I follow closely, and it's been of great use to us. And the airborne EM that the New South Wales government flew recently is really interesting stuff. And so yeah, look, we don't have any specific technology we use, but we like to keep abreast of everything.
Gary Stevenson also has a question for you, Rob.
Hey, Rob. Just with regards to the current share price from an investor point of view, it's taken a bit of a hit lately. Just wondering what your views were on that. And it was quite strong back in 2018. Is the market not recognising some of the projects that you've got, or do you put it down to, just curious as to what your views are on that?
No, good question, Kerry. Yeah, look, baby with the bathwater is the way I'd describe what's happened. You know, I think our share price had already had fallen down, and there was a strong correlation with the zinc price in a commodity sense, and obviously the Waggatank Southern Nights discovery is a zinc-rich deposit. But look, I just think when everything hit the fan recently, there was people just dumped everything in a hurry, and unfortunately, you know, under those scenarios, the pendulum swings too far. So therein lies the opportunity, is what I would say. And I'm sure we're not the only, we're not an orphan in that sense out in the stock market. But I certainly think the pendulum swung too far.
And one more question, if it's okay, Lucy. We've got one from Benita.
Sure.
Oh, we can't. Sorry, Benita, we can't hear you. You are on. No, you've just been muted again. Benita's question. Can you try again, Benita?
Sorry.
There you are.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, what I wanted to know is I was very interested in when you were talking about the future developments that you've got. And I was curious around existing infrastructure. So how do you see yourselves connecting in with markets?
Look, the infrastructure out in the COBAR area is very good. Water's probably, you know, the biggest issue, or has been until recent rains. But generally speaking, it's an excellent place to work. It's, 3G, 4G coverage. There's high transmission power lines through the district, bitumen roads everywhere. So look, you know, and there is other milling infrastructure obviously in the district too, you know, so some of them are short of resources. We're short of mills. So yeah, look, there's lots of opportunity around that, I guess.
Okay, look, thanks so much, Rob. It's such an exciting story, and look, just on that point, infrastructure is always pretty close at hand in New South Wales. That's one of the beauties of being a highly populated state. So let's now move south to Gerald Whittle from Whittle Consulting. He's based in Victoria but operates around the world, and in fact a couple of his colleagues are also here. Gerald is, as I mentioned, CEO of Whittle Consulting, and he is the guru of strategic planning, critical for any explorer and, of course, operator. So over to you, Gerald.
Thank you. So I think a lot of people recognise the Whittle name. I'm not the famous one, it's my father made that famous. I'm just trying to live up to his reputation. So he wrote the Whittle software 35 years ago, the pit optimisation software that any geologist or mining engineer would be familiar with. Sold that business to Gemcom, now owned by Dassault Systèmes, and software is advanced. Whittle Consulting has been around for 20 years, and we've been specialising in the long-term planning, strategic planning for mining projects and operations, not just looking at the pit, but the whole value chain. Now, if we could have my slides, please, I'll explain what that concept means. And that's a lovely picture of me, but let's go to the next one. So if I had to generalize on what the opportunity or what the problem is in the industry is, this is a complicated business, running a mine. A lot of technical complexity, a lot of data, a lot of uncertainty. And as a general observation, the way the industry is run is in organizational silos. There is no one person understands the whole value chain at the technical level. So we break it up. That's the engineering approach to any problem, is break it up into components. So we have geologists specializing, describing the ore body, hopefully in a way that's useful to everyone else. We have mining engineers and operators looking at how to extract the rock from the ground and move it to its destination, the plant or the waste dump. We have processing specialists, metallurgists looking at how to extract the metal from the rock, marketing people on where to sell it, finance people on how to control the capital and the costs, the HR person looking after somebody else, often not involved in a strategic planning process at all. And we frankly have chaos because these groups are pursuing different objectives. Geologists maximising reserves, mining engineers minimising costs, and to do that they want to maximise the utilisation of their equipment. Processing managers either trying to maximise metal production or percentage recovery, neither of which is correct, I can prove it. Marketing people maximising price, finance. This is confusion. It's like having a football team and we're all running in different directions. So there's an opportunity to align this thinking, and it's not going to be a simple process. There's a lot of decisions made in the mining value chain. They all affect each other. If you change your product spec, you've got to look at the way you run the plant. You change the way you run the plant, you've got to change your cut-off grade. Change your cut-off grade, you've got to look at the mine plan again. But that isn't, in general, how the planning system is approached. So let's move to the next slide. So the 1 minute explanation of the approach we're taking to overcome this is to build a single model of the whole system. Even in a pre-feasibility study, there are a lot of data, but they're in 6 different systems: a geological model, block model, a mining systems model in Vulcan or Deswick, a JK SimMet model for the plant with great sophistication, a logistics model with Monte Carlo simulation, commercial model in a spreadsheet, and a financial model in Xeras or something. Lots of data in 6 or 7 different systems, even in a pre-feasibility study, let alone an operation, but managed by 6 different silos. So our approach is to build a single model of the whole process. And we end up with a single model. It's obviously a very sophisticated model with everything from the block model through to the discounted cash flow in one model. Now that would be an interesting exercise in its own right because it checks the thing adds up, and it often doesn't, unfortunately. But having a single model in the right software, which is the software we're using in-house, the Proba E software, we're able to manipulate those settings, and not just by trial and error, but actually optimize and come up with an integrated life of mine plan. This involves cooperation of all those organizational groups. It becomes a format and a framework for working together for the first time. So in this process, we use a technique called activity-based costing, looking very specifically at which activities, drill and blast, excavate, load, haul, crush, grind, float, leach, whatever, what characteristics of the rock drive those activity costs, attaching the cost to the blocks in the block model to get a dollar version of the block model. We have a geological version of the block model, tons and grades, but you can find two blocks with exactly the same grade of gold or copper or zinc or whatever have very different cash margins because of the very different mining, processing, selling costs. So we're mining dollars, and if you get to that point, you're halfway. The next observation is we have a very complex system here, and we haven't necessarily even built it yet because it's a project. Theory of constraints tells us that every system has constraints and bottlenecks. Every system has a primary bottleneck. It's the part of the system that most limits the performance of the whole system. And unfortunately in mining, that keeps moving around because the ore body changes as you go from high stripping to low stripping to different densities to grades. Different bondwork index, different abrasiveness index, density in the slurry, melting point in the smelter, etc., etc. And there's often data on these things, but mine planners, strategic planners don't necessarily have the capacity to use all that data. So in a sophisticated model, you can use all of that. And we end up looking at the whole value chain simultaneously, the whole life of mine simultaneously on a dollars per bottleneck unit basis. It's not about grade. Grade is not king, I'm sorry to say. Dollars per bottleneck unit is king. We have to get the cash through the bottlenecks in the system as rapidly as possible. We're running a business here, and the economic value is defined by net present value. Money has a time value, an indisputable law of nature. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the objective is to take a life of mine plan, and we're normally getting involved once there is some sort of base case, not always, but generally. And the blue line is the cash flow profile over the life of the mine. And they've used Whittle software and maybe something else, and we would call that partially optimized. And the systematic, comprehensive approach of these techniques, which is absolutely a team effort, it's got to be cross-functional collaboration supported by a sophisticated framework with the mathematics to do the analysis, is to drive the cash flow forward, up and forward. And you don't need an MBA in finance to realize those red lines in terms of cash flow are far superior from an economic criteria. And it is the economic criteria that's going to determine whether this project advances, whether you raise finance, etc. So I'm not exaggerating if I said, 2/3 or more than half the cases, you end up with double cash flow in the first 5 years. Full body, plant, same mining system, same metallurgical recovery, same metal price assumptions, just a different conclusion of what the plan should look like. One example, 30-second example is, common bottleneck in the system, any mine, so gold, copper, zinc, running a mill. Generally, the right bottleneck is the power capacity of the mill. Therefore, the bondwork index of the rock is just as important as its metal grade. I could argue actually it's more important, but let's just call it equally important. Because the bondwork index in this example, and I can give you dozens of examples, is a major cost driver. The grade drives the revenue, but the hardness of the rock drives the costs and the throughput of the material. The rate at which you can get the dollars out of the ground is determined by that. So it's a cost driver, the grade's the revenue driver, but the throughput, the rate at which you get this difference, the cash, is determined by that. And if you do your pits phase, underground, schedule, cut-off, stockpiling, blending, grind size, mass pull the concentrate, product specification, logistic solutions, and you scale the business around the knowledge that the mill power, in this example, is the bottleneck in the system, you get different pits phase. It's a different outcome. Pits could move several hundred meters in one direction. Undergrounds, grow in one area and shrink in another. The sequence changes. The cutoff will be different at different times, and it's not cut-off grade, it's cut-off on dollars per bottleneck unit. The grind size will change, not every day, but from year to year, the product specification, etc. And it's like, wow, it's a bit more complicated, certainly complicated to work out, but it's a different philosophy of how to run a mine, and with MPV improvement, financeability, likelihood of advancing improved dramatically by 20, 30, 50, 60% is often the outcome. Every case is different, you've got to do the work, but anyway, that's integrated strategic planning. That's my 3 to 4 minute, and I didn't time myself, explanation of a very complex subject. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions.
Wonderful. Look, thanks so much, Gerald. And I believe there's a question from Joe. We'll unmute you, Joe.
I think I've unmuted myself. Gerald, thank you very much for those comments. My question is, the industry is sort of moving headlong down the automation route, albeit it's uneven across the industry. Do you have any comments of what the implications of this rush is to mine planning.
Yes, in fact, we've done a lot of analysis on automation. Automated haul trucks is a very popular topic. And what's interesting is usually the change in one part of the process, like automation of your haul fleet or anything else, is a lot more bigger than you might think. At one level, you think, well, if we get rid of drivers of trucks, we save the labour and we're going to save some money. Completely irrelevant in that analysis. It's not about labour saving. It's about better performance, more availability, driving at consistently faster speeds, less tension on the tyres and the moving parts. So it's about productivity. But it moves on, because if you have more productivity from your equipment, that means you can achieve either more output or the same output with less capital. But actually, because of the performance is so much better, the bigger steps are that you can actually run, and this is more in the long run, you can run narrower haul roads. You'd have to leave big margins on your ramps for humans driving trucks past each other. But if it's computerized and automated, you can move down the track of actually running them. I mean, technically you could run them within a centimetre of each other. You'd never do that, but you don't need 3.5 metres between them when they're not humans driving. You can end up with single lanes with passing bays. Now, you think, well, what's the advantage of having a narrow ramp? Well, in deep copper pits or any deep pit, this affects the pit slopes. And by knocking a few 5 metres or 8 metres off the width of a ramp, this can save you mining tens of millions of tonnes. It actually means you can get to parts of the ore body that you've never reached before. So our argument on these technologies, and automation is just one of them, is the benefit is way beyond what you see as the immediate impact, reducing labour and getting better productivity. This actually redefines the ore body. It means you can actually, if you go all the way, which we argue you need one of these enterprise optimization models to actually calculate, you're going to be mining deposits that you couldn't mine before because you've actually resolved a particular problem in one place. So we argue that you've got to look beyond the first order impact of any technology change, which is the labour, the productivity, the cost, or whatever, and look beyond, if it's any significance in mining or processing or anywhere else in the value chain, look at the impact on the whole system, because you're possibly looking at half the actual business case, and that would be a shame.
Yeah, we've got another question actually from the audience. Quickly, one more, Gerald, from Rolf. I've unmuted you, Rolf, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Gerald. I'm wondering if you could tell us what you think of CRCOR's EIS. Have you had any exposure to it? Do you use it?
We haven't, no, good question. So EIS, for those that don't know, is a very sophisticated data modelling system to capture the way what happens to the material as it goes right through the system, which is allows you to look at different mining methods, fragmentation, blasting techniques, screening, comminution, etc., etc., etc. And so it's geometallurgy, if you like, getting a much deeper understanding of that. And it is more holistic in terms of it's looking at the whole process of the ore from start to finish, not just looking at the mill or the float or the leach, which is previous systems very specialised. So we haven't worked directly with it. I'm aware of it because we're part of CRCOR as well. And this gives us the data to do a proper strategic optimisation, because it means we've got the numbers to experiment with. And the point I've had with EIS is we should be using that, and that becomes input into an optimizer, which is our integrated strategic planning process. It gives us those data points, or a whole range of data points and possibilities. But the decisions on what should be the cutoff grade, what should be the grind size, what should be, can't be done on just a spot, what maximises recovery or maximises cash or maximises life of mine. It needs to be done in the context of a strategic planning process. And you've got the trade-offs in that sort of process is opportunity cost, time value of money, discount rates, etc., etc. So the development of the, because when we started trying to do this work, even 8 to 10 years ago, there just wasn't the information. People had no idea what happened if you change the grind size. What happened? People are testing composites, for example, not looking at different types of material and the different way they behave. So EIS is a very powerful tool. Haven't had the chance to work directly with it. Would love to anytime.
Excellent. Thanks, Gerald.
So now we're on to Queensland. So Queensland has a strong minerals and coal sector, including the components needed for the renewable energy industry and generating over $5 billion in royalties. The regulator in Queensland is the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy. AMEC works closely with DNRME to help explorers and producers do what they need to do. The person who helps us with this is Shaun Ferris, and Shaun is Deputy Director General of Georesources in DNRME, so I'll hand over to Shaun now.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we're all meeting today in the digital sense, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that may be participating in this Zoom conference today. Firstly, my thanks to AMEC for the invitation to speak and Mines and Money for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to be touching on the state of Queensland's response to COVID-19 for the exploration and mining sector. I think you'll all agree that we've already had some very interesting and insightful points raised by the speakers that have come before me. Firstly, I just want to put aside state rivalries for just one moment and just acknowledge that it's fantastic to see both New South Wales and Queensland doing their part to support and promote what is an important sector, our resources sector. I've got a short slide deck that I'm just going to anchor my my thoughts and points to today. So if we can bring that up on the screen, fantastic. If we can go to the next slide, slide 2, that'd be great. So I think it's fair to say that we're all seeing the economic impacts of the lockdown of communities across the globe, and we're still continuing to see shockwaves across the economies worldwide. Many of the industries sectors that we all deal with have been hit hard, and whilst the mineral and energy sectors have been a rare bright spot, it certainly hasn't been immune to these impacts. There are a range of challenges faced by the resources sector globally and also in Queensland. Of particular note is the real impact that's occurring in terms of global capital markets on funding levels, and of course commodity prices, which we're all quite in touch with. In some cases, the commodity prices have fallen significantly. The table on the left plots the commodity prices over recent times, and you can see that there's been price declines across the board, with gold being the only one anomaly. And that makes sense. It's become a safe haven in these times of uncertainty. Should these downward trends continue in terms of price, or the lower prices remain, then we'll see potential for projects to examine their viability, which of course can translate to production and employment impacts. We've also currently got border and social distancing restrictions in place, which are impacting the ability of many to carry out exploration activities and are continuing to impact on production. COVID-19, goes without saying, has impacted the ability of the exploration sector and miners to get on the ground and do their work. And these are the restrictions that we're likely to have to live with for some time. And the longer restrictions are in place, the more significant the impact is likely to be. So turning to the economic recovery, the Reserve Bank of Australia has modelled a number of scenarios in terms of economic recovery. The central case recovery beginning in the second half of 2020, largely led by strong consumption. However, no matter what the scenario we look at here, recovery is the long-term proposition, and the economy may not bounce back with the pace that was experienced with the impact initially. The key takeaway and for us is that we need to be flexible and have a staged approach to economic recovery. And I'll talk to Queensland's approach a little later. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Wonderful. So I just want to turn to the assistance measures that the Queensland government's put in for our resources sector. The department and the Queensland government understands that explorers, particularly junior mineral explorers, are doing it tough in the current environment. And as a result, we've taken urgent steps to assist and address this. To support the exploration industry during these times, we've implemented a number of key measures which are summarised on that slide. But in a little bit of detail, and not unlike New South Wales, but again, I'll bring the parochialism back. we've probably gone a little bit further now, my New South Wales colleagues. We've implemented a 12-month rent waiver for all exploration permit holders where their rent was due within the 1st of April and the 30th of September of this year window. We've also capped all of our fees so they won't be subject to CPI in the coming financial year. We've also recognised that COVID-19 is an exceptional event that may require explorers to vary their work programs or their expenditure commitments simply because they can't get on the ground. So we've also stood up a streamlined application process and provided guidance to industry to assist with that, and there are no application fees for those particular applications. We've also updated our operational guidance for applicants for those amendments, which specifically refers to COVID-19 as a reason for seeking variation to these obligations. And as I said, we've put in a streamlined application process, and we're resourcing that as a priority for our agency and also the resources sector. We've also, over the last 6 weeks, been working very strongly with the resources sector to ensure that with the border restrictions that we've got in place, that critical resource sector employees can continue to move across the state boundaries. So those employees that would ordinarily live in other states but travel to Queensland for their work, whether it be fly in, fly out or drive in, drive out, we have an exemption process where they're deemed to be critical for the operation of a particular site. Now, this has ensured that we've been able to contribute as a sector to the minimisation of the spread of COVID-19, whilst ensuring that resource operations and productions can continue. Also on the 7th of May, our Minister, Dr. Anthony Lyon, the Minister for Natural Resources, Mines and Energy, announced the release of 2 new coal exploration areas totalling 108 square kilometres near Moranbah. And he also announced that the government has brought forward from future years $2.8 million of collaborative exploration grants from a $13.8 million package announced last year. And this relief package is part of a broad and staged economic recovery plan for the state, recognising that the resources sector will be fundamental to this recovery and our economic recovery. So we can move to the last slide. I just want to outline the Queensland Government's economic recovery approach. So the Queensland Government's economic recovery strategy, Unite and Recover for Queensland, was released on the 19th of May. And it outlines how the government will work in partnership with the private sector to help Queensland recover from the economic impacts of COVID-19. The package focuses on infrastructure investment, accelerated construction of projects, and ultimately and importantly, creating jobs. The strategy has 3 immediate priorities. The first one being strengthening Queensland industries, and third, enabling future growth. I'll just pull out a couple of key aspects of that strategy. The strategy includes a determination to maintain infrastructure investment at more than $50 billion over the next 4 years. There's a $20 million allocation towards the construction of a Queensland apprenticeship centre in renewable hydrogen at Beenleigh here in southeast Queensland, and a further $14.8 million to support project development of the Copper String 2.0 project that will connect the Northwest Minerals province with the national electricity market. Now, these announcements are the first stage of what will likely be a multi-staged approach to the economic recovery in Queensland. And key to the success of these strategies is a close partnership between government, our department, and my team within Georesources, and the private sector being in the resources sector. I also want to finish off by noting that the department is currently and will continue to work very closely with our resources peaks and companies through COVID-19. And of course, AMEC have played a critical role in that space. For example, we are currently meeting and will continue to meet for the foreseeable future with Queensland industry peaks at the CEO and the senior executive level and a continuing very productive dialogue around our COVID-19 response. That for me has been an invaluable exercise to ensure that the resources sector is able to better inform our economic recovery, and that we as a department are able to nimbly and quickly and responsibly act with further measures should they be required to support the sector.
Thanks, Shaun. We're pretty short on time, but we've just got one quick question on the group chat here around what approaches should businesses take to help employees and build trust during COVID?
That's a great question. My view is that we're actually all in the process of doing that. I'll take my example of what I'd call adaptive leadership. We've been working with our teams to empower them to make to adapt to this new way of working, which is around our remote working. Now, of course, that is not always possible in the resources sector, but certainly for our office-based staff, it's something that they've embraced. My sense is that we've seen a surprisingly an uplift in, or maybe not surprisingly, an uplift in our productivity. The quality of our workers is increasing, and the responsiveness of our teams, particularly in response to the resource sector, is also on the improve. We're all learning very quickly that when a challenge like COVID-19 is tossed at us, that the best way to approach it is through a partnership approach with our key stakeholders. And of course, one of our most precious and key stakeholders is our employees. So we've maintained very, very open dialogue and very open lines of communication with our teams and all of our employees to ensure that they're getting very rapid information from us around our COVID response, how we're supporting the industry, and any other aspects around COVID.
Shaun, I have a quick question here from Katie Ann, who unfortunately can't get her mic to work at the moment. But is there scope for the collaborative exploration initiative to be expanded to all commodities?
So the collaborative exploration initiative is focused on what we call new economy minerals. So it's a fairly expansive list of commodities. That's its primary focus at the moment, and it is a primary focus for Queensland Government to support the exploration activities that will go into what we see as an important future industry for both our state and national economy.
Okay. And one more quick one is, how do you see the data modernisation project assisting the industry for recovery?
That's a great question. So for those that don't know, we're standing up a fantastic platform called the Geoscience Data Modernisation Project, which is will be a data lake for the curation and storage and the supply of geoscience and geological information for industry. Right now in COVID, where companies are finding it difficult to get onto the ground for a whole range of reasons, whether it just be simply because of border restrictions or because of cash on their books. Some of the lower cost activities around exploration is trawling through historical geoscience and geological information to assist them with their exploration knowledge and maybe even some of their future project development opportunities. So our Geoscience Data Modernisation Project, which goes live in a few months' time, but is being trialled by a small number of industry participants, will make that data more freely available and quickly available. And we see that there's great opportunity through data analytics, machine learning, and AI to reach into those data sets and pull out all sorts of geological insights that have never been able to have been done prior to making that information available in the digital form.
Thanks, Shaun.
Next up, we have Daniel Thomas from Hammer Metals. Hammer Metals were a recent recipient of the Collaborative Exploration Initiative grant that Shaun mentioned in his talk. I'll hand it over to Dan.
Thanks, Kate. I'm conscious that I stand between everyone here and probably the end of their day, so I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, thanks to to AMEC, Mines and Money and Whittle for the opportunity to come and have a quick chat. If I can just echo a little bit of what Shaun said there, even pre-COVID, Hammer Metals is embracing working with the State Department there and AMEC really to try and advance our projects. In the COVID world, it is really important to be working closely with one another, and we're certainly appreciative of all the assistance we've got from the government there. The rent reductions for a significant tenement holder like Hammer are important. They go a long way. Similarly, I guess the ability to apply to defer some of our expenditure commitments will also help in us seeing through, I guess, what is a difficult time. I think for those of you that don't know Hammer Metals, we're a copper and gold explorer of around 2,000 square kilometres of tenure in the Mount Isa region. We also hold a gold project in the Yandal Belt in Western Australia, and we're actively exploring both of those regions, and we're keen to get started again in a post-COVID world. I think the industry as a whole has really done quite well. It's met the challenge without major incident. I think the ability for a significant incident, given the regions that we operate in, the close nature of our work environment, touch wood, I think it's been a really tremendous effort from everyone, and the ability to continue exploring in a post-COVID environment, I think, is important for the industry and something we're keen to keep doing. I've got a couple of slides. I won't dwell on them too much, but if we can pull them up, I might let you guys read through the slides and have a look at them, and rather than talking to them, I'll talk in general. Our drilling activities, along with many others, was suspended in late March. We've managed to complete some lower risk activities in the interim. For example, we've completed a number of geophysical surveys where the teams have been small, they've been able to be socially distanced. Obviously, a number of desktop studies like many have done. In fact, the suspension of our WA gold project was semi-fortuitous in the fact that it allowed us to receive the assays from the first half of that air core program. It enabled us to find a nice anomaly there, and we'll be able to utilise the budget from that remaining project to go and test that anomaly rather than continuing, I guess, on the original program. So I guess as an explorer, we've suspended programs, and I talk in general nature. People in the industry have reduced costs, the overheads, salaries. We've seen the government-led initiatives. Most of these activities are really designed for the preservation of exploration companies. I think one of the things we need to do as we look into the future, and with a few adjustments to the way in which we conduct our activities and the way in we operate, I think we're very lucky to be in Australia, a much lower risk environment than others. I think we need to turn our attention to progressing our exploration activities. Again, for junior companies, as Shaun alluded to, the biggest challenge in uncertain times is how we fund these programs. Investors don't like uncertainty. Gold is certainly a flavour of the month at the moment, and we're fortuitous that we're exploring for copper and gold. But the other thing we're really fortunate to have, and we applied for these grants back in I think January, we were awarded them in February, but we've been fortunate to get two Queensland Government Collaborative Incentive Scheme grants. The two that I'll talk about today were awarded in February. The one on the screen at the moment is a magnetotelluric study that we conducted at our Kelman deposit. This survey was able to be completed in late March, early April. We've recently announced the results here. And I guess one of the key things here for us is really transforming this project into something more. It's sat there for a number of years with some really high grade potential to it. It's a 20 million tonne deposit. It grades between 1.5% and 2% copper equivalent metal. Probably need to talk to Gerald about how we move this project forward and how we optimise the NPV on it. But what we've done here with this magnetotelluric study really is we've proven that the study has picked up the mineralisation at surface. There's a number of other neat conductive type features that haven't been tested by drilling. It really transforms this project and gives us the ability to go out, potentially find funding for this and drill targets which might completely change what we know the Kelman project is at the moment. I mentioned some of the high grade potential of it at depth. I mean, we've got 7 metres at 22% copper. There's not a lot of projects out there that hold that potential. I think one of the key things about this project and in gaining the CEI grant was its unique nature in the fact that it's a copper, gold, molybdenum and rhenium deposit. It fits really nicely in with the I guess, the critical minerals strategies that the Queensland government announced in November last year. And so I guess with that in mind, it's one of the key areas that we thought we could relook at and sort of get some funding towards and progress. But having that government funding really enables us to have certainty around how the program is funded and enables us to continue doing the work. So on the critical minerals theme, if we just skip on to the next slide, the other grant that we won from the government was for the drilling of a rare earth prospect at our Coppeny project. Historically, this has been a copper target. We're in joint venture with Mount Isa Mines on this particular project. We were going through some old drilling early last year. We noticed really, really broad intercepts of reasonable grade rare earth mineralisation, some pretty significant amounts over a metre. And what we did was we went and had a look at all of our old data. We realised that there was some higher grade potential within some of our soil data. Where this existing hole was, it probably wasn't in the optimal place. So we went, well, you know what, there's really an opportunity here for a rare earth deposit. If we drill in the most optimal place, then potentially the results are going to be better than what we've seen in the old drilling. So again, prime candidate thinking about what the Queensland government was looking to fund. Mount Isa, well-known base metal district, similar potential for rare earths and critical minerals and the new mineral economy. We thought it was a great opportunity and a great project to take forward. We won the funding for it. And I guess with that funding certainty, we're really looking forward to getting forward and drilling that project. The other two drilling programs on here that we're hoping to commence in mid-June are with our JOGMEC joint venture. We've been quite active in Queensland early this year, pre-COVID. JOGMEC, we welcomed on board as a joint venture partner in November last year. I don't think it was finalised until early January. We completed a number of geophysical and mapping surveys over the first 2 months of this year. We've defined a really nice target at a prospect called Shadow. Sits on surface nearby the Mount Phelps hematite deposit. Really supports, I guess, our ventures in the region for a large-scale IOCG, Ernest Henry type project. Mineralised breccia, you can see some of the rocks in the corner of the screen there. You can see highly weathered, oxidised hematite-looking rock on surface. The breccia you crack open on the right-hand side there shows you the copper. So you can see just how easy it is for past explorers with an outcropping mineralisation event for past explorers to walk past this property, not chip the rocks, not see the copper. And we think it's a great project, a great target. We're looking forward to drilling it. So I guess my message is that post-COVID world, we're lucky we're the position we're in. With some assured funding for some of our projects, we're able to get out there and get active again. Similarly, in Western Australia, we're looking forward to getting back drilling in mid-June. We've got a busy few months ahead. We're looking forward to it. We note that there's some operational issues and difficulties, but again, as I said before, working in partnership with the likes of AMEC and with the likes of state government departments, finding solutions to them appears possible.
Thanks, Dan. We've just got one question so far. The question is, what would you like to see government do in a post-COVID world to help explorers?
I think funding programs like the CEI, the round that closes, I think on the weekend or early next week, I think they are exceptional opportunities for people with projects and without the certainty of funding to really push their particular projects forward. Our team spent a lot of time trawling through old data and really tailored some applications in January this year to try and get that funding. I think those types of activities are more critical than ever in a post-COVID world. The ones in Queensland at the moment being 100% funded by the State Department, I think are exceptional. It really offers explorers a great opportunity to get out there and move forward the projects. I think similarly for the state to fund these projects, they can fund the best ones. I think in the first round there were 70 applications, maybe more. There's a lot of good ideas out there. We really get to cherry pick the best ideas and get them funded, which is good for the industry. New discoveries, I think, move the industry forward, move the interest forward. I think Queensland, in many respects, in Mount Isa, is a little bit of a forgotten region in terms of exploration. And I truly believe that the next discovery in that region isn't far around the corner. And then I think the interest in the region sort of expands significantly.
Okay, Dan, thanks so much for that presentation, as well as the different presentations from all of our speakers today. Lucy and Kate from the team at AMEC, thank you so much for your assistance in this week's episode. Always great to have different perspectives, including that of government today. Michael Wright and Shaun Ferris, thank you very much for joining us. We're looking forward to having you both at the APAC Online event that's coming up in June. Gerald Whittle and the Whittle Consulting team, always a delight to get a technical perspective in, and I know that there are definitely follow-up questions. I've seen some in the chat for people to throw your way, so look out for those. Dan and Rob, two amazing projects, and I think with these projects, like many others that are featured on events like this or otherwise that are not, always a good opportunity to talk about update, what's important, what are some of the challenges and opportunities. But one of the important things I think is that all mining projects are still getting sort of funding or investment or interest from the market. Even at this particular time, it's all dependent on the project, it's dependent on many different factors. But it's great to see both of yours doing so well. So congratulations both Dan and Rob on that. Look, everyone for joining us. Obviously, we've gone over time a little bit today, but thank you for being part of today's 5 at 5. In a fortnight, we'll hold the next one, which is related to gold specifically. We'll have some gold projects, a gold analyst and a gold investor talking about gold projects for that one. So look forward to seeing you there, or otherwise at our APAC Online event. Thank you very much for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.